Welcome to another entry in a long-running playlist called Is It Still Worth It? This is where I take a piece of Status Quo merchandise from the past and ask, if you happen to see it, is it still worth picking up in 2024? This video is actually a follow-up to a previous entry in which I asked about the format of CD singles, something which got abandoned a long time ago. I also made the argument that CD singles and vinyl singles kind of have positives and negatives, that they're different from each other and have different bonuses to them. So let's ask the question, are vinyl singles still worth picking up in 2024? Now, unlike the CD, the vinyl has seen a bit of a resurgence in recent years. In fact, even Quo has released newer songs on this format. In fact, I think even in the 90s they were still doing it pretty much as the format was starting to be abandoned. And when I started collecting 21 years ago, vinyl singles at car boot sales and charity shops were the cheapest way of getting music, and this one, The Wanderer, was the first one that I picked up, and over the years I've managed to pick up several more, of which I might go into in another video. And for me, they were a great introduction. Like the B-side of The Wanderer is a song called Can't Be Done from the Back to Back album. I hadn't heard it when I first got that single, so I wore that out, and that introduced me to that song. I loved the intro, I loved the vibe of it, and later on I heard the Back to Back album, and I think that song is still my favourite because I heard it on here and I got acclimatized to it, and I would imagine that back in the day that happened a few times. The thing about singles is these were released mostly to promote an upcoming album. So usually it was a song taken from an album. There are exceptions to that, such as Tune to the Music and In My Chair, which were just released, you know, to try and get some engagement with the band's brand at that point and establish new musical ventures, if you will. And great singles they were too. They weren't included on albums up to that point, later included on compilations. Some of these singles had B-sides on them, which were never included on official versions of those original albums. Songs like Hard Ride, for example, the Alan Lancaster-led track. And there are loads more. Joanne on the B-side of Caroline as well. These were reasons to pick up a single back in the day, I guess, because you'd buy the single, it would help promote the album, but you'd have a little bonus there waiting for you that wouldn't be on the album, so I guess it would encourage that engagement. But what about in the modern day? Do all these bonuses help? I wouldn't say so, because all of these songs have been reissued on deluxe versions of the albums. They've been included on compilations. There's like bonus editions now. These songs were actually, some of the B-sides, including the non-album ones, were included on the early 80s compilation To Be or Not To Be. So they've been available in other forms for over 40 years at this point. So I guess what was once a bonus is not so much a bonus anymore. One other thing I would say about 7-inch vinyl singles is that they can sound terrible at times. I've got some, to be fair, from other artists like the Wombles and stuff that sound amazing, but some of them, yeah, they just sound not very good to my ears. Certainly not as good as a 12-inch vinyl of the same thing. They get damaged easily too, probably owing to their size perhaps. But another thing, I mean, this swirl logo on this paper plane single, I mean, how many of you listened to this back in 1972, and in addition to the rockin' rhythms laid down by Rick Parfitt and co, were you just watching the swirl go round on the Vertigo label on there? Please do let me know your experience of that. So those about the sound quality and the fragile nature of the format are kind of negatives. But what I would say in defense of that is that sometimes I feel that when you're listening to this less than ideal sound quality, you're getting an idea about what consumers heard when they first got it back, you know, from the store, which is really interesting to me from a researcher's point of view. The other thing as well is that a lot of singles, most singles had artwork and stuff, but whenever you're picking them up, you pretty much have them in this kind of sleeve, don't you? Or, you know, just a blank sleeve, pretty much. You don't... I was looking at a seller the other day, and they had all of their singles with the original artwork and stuff, and I thought, that's brilliant. You know, it's great. It's not something I see very often with the 70s stuff, because it tends to be a little bit more, I don't know, more kind of back to basics. It is kind of comparable, isn't it, to the 90s, when you had game cartridges and people would take the cartridge out of the box, I guess, or the box would get misplaced and you just have the cartridge there, or you'd find you know, another receptacle for it. It's kind of like that, I guess. And even on some of these replacement sleeves, you even have people's handwriting from back in the day. How many of you used to write your name in the corner there to indicate, you know, which one was yours? So let's answer this question in a much more broad term, in terms of collectors, I guess. I think if you're like me and you just like having the music on the format, then pretty much, yeah, go on. You know, you've got a much bigger pool to go from. I think if you want to try and get the sleeves as they were originally intended, in decent condition and stuff, you may have to decide whether you think it's worth it or not in order to, you know, go forward with that. I think in addition to that, the price point is probably a good indicator of whether it's worth it or not as well, because a lot of vinyl singles these days can be as little as 5p up to, you know, £5, I guess, for a decent copy of one. So it all depends on your preferences. What do you think? Do you still collect second-hand and new 7-inch vinyl singles? Do let me know in the comments below.